All right. Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. Good afternoon to those of you on the West Coast. Welcome to this exclusive edition of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. And as you can see in the background, we do have a treat for you guys as we will be talking about the horror flick known as The Whistler. So let me bring that up now from what we have here in the background. Releasing in limited release theatrically today, the film directed by Diego Velasco from a script he co-wrote with Esteban Orozco and Carolina Paez, based on an earlier screenplay by Nacho Palacios, follows grieving parents who inherit a remote Venezuelan farm occupied by spirit-summoning squatters. Amongst this conflict, a desperate mother opens a doorway to the dead, unleashing a malevolent spirit whose haunting whistle lures victims to their deaths. Now, as you can see from the cover art here, I will not be alone in discussing this horror film. So let me introduce today's guests. Our guest today broke all Venezuelan box office records and earned 35 international festival awards with his first feature, The 0 Hour, and was featured as one of the 10 mover and reshapers of Latin American cinema by Variety magazine. Lastly, today's guest is the co-founder of Open Studios, a development company committed to powerful storytelling that gives voice to the Latin experience, exploring both our current condition and our past history with authenticity, nuance, and humor. It is my pleasure to welcome to the show director Diego Velasco. Let me see if I can bring him on now.
Thank you
Diego,
so much. Thank
how
you
you
so much
doing?
for having me on the show. Man, what an
Absolutely.
introduction.
I
Wow.
try, I try,
I appreciate
but
that. I'll take it.
we'll warrant it, sir. So first off, congratulations. I understand that you've had your world premiere this past Saturday in Brazil.
Yeah, we
So
went.
yeah, so can you share a little bit about that of having it seen for the very first time, like literally for the very first time?
Yeah, we went to this amazing festival in Brazil called Fantaspoa, and it's like the biggest genre film festival in Latin America, and it was really cool because like some of these big festivals, it's all about like the glitz and the VIP and the red carpet. And you're invited to this party, not this party. And
Right.
this festival is just like pure love of cinema. Like all the directors are watching each other movies. All the directors are mixing with the audience members. We're all hanging out, going to bars afterwards. We're all just like supporting each other. It was like it reminded me what was it like to like make films with my buddies. So to go to there and be surrounded by such great movies and then be like scared of like, oh my god, what if people don't get it, it was the first time to do like premiere of public that nobody knows me, and we got clapping. Everybody really liked it. People jumped at the right times, people laughed at the right times, people talked back to the screen, which I think it's a great compliment.
Yes.
And it's exactly what I needed to kind of kick off this whole campaign.
Awesome. So I understand that this is a film or to say a story that's near and dear to you in terms of growing up and being kind of exposed to the lore. But can you talk, a little bit more about that of having to do a deep dive to make sure, just as I was mentioning in the intro, of trying to make the lore behind it as authentic as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with this legend called the Whistler, and I always spent the summers at my uncle's farm. So every time my cousins and I were trying to get into trouble, my uncle would be like, "Careful, because people who are looking for trouble, the Whistler's out there looking at you." So it's like, okay. As I grew up with it, and as I started doing film, I was like, man, nobody's really made a movie about this. So my friend Nacho Palacios, who wrote the first draft of the screenplay, pitched me the idea, and I was like, the further you hear it, the closer it is. Yeah, let's do it. And then came this huge cycle. It took a long time to try to like take that cool tag and make it into a reality. And as that was happening, Venezuela was changing. So then, more, as a lot of you know already, more than 8 million Venezuelans have left Venezuela. So I had to kind of find a way to, you know, kind of like natural way bringing immigration, or the people who have left, the people who have come back, and the people who have wanted to leave and have not, and the people kind of stayed. So that is a theme in that movie underneath all the scares. And then there's another local aspect of it, of the cult of Mara Leonza, which is a religion, a true religion that most people don't know it exists. But if you Google here on YouTube Mara Leonza, you're going to see some crazy stuff that we try to be very authentic in the movie. And so those three things kind of came together, and that's how this movie kind of manifested itself, if you will.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And in getting into we were just talking about the world premiere, but when we're doing any film, it can be a major undertaking, let alone having it be a independent film and not, being a huge studio picture. So could you share that component too of thinking back, because I'm sure that it probably happened at some point in vicariously observing your film through the eyes of others at this world premiere, of thinking back of day one of production, of pre-production perhaps, and trying to wrangle all the necessary parties and resources to be able to make this film come together.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a village, and like I was showing the movie yesterday to like the cast and the crew, so they could get an opportunity to kind of see it on the big screen, and I was just like in awe about like the early, rides to the set before the sun came out, working all nights, solving problems on the fly, and it's just like the fact that we all came together, we all made something that's going to outlast us all is humbling and also very inspiring. But I think like the hardest part of making this movie was creating the universe. Like so I feel like not many movies, most horror movies are always like in a castle or always in a gothic, southern house, or in a forest that is very cold and snow, and not many movies are in Latin America. So like I wanted to like find an exotic location that looked beautiful during the day and terrifying at night, because that's what these Venezuelan plains, you can see for miles away that you're surrounded by nothing, and during the day you see all this greenery and it's gorgeous, but at night you're like, oh my god, what is out there? So we had to find like a sugarcane plantation where we could kind of take it over, be there for 3 weeks, and just be able to kind of have the liberty of turning the camera anywhere we wanted and just knowing we have an amazing shot. So finding that location, finding that world, I think was like the biggest obstacle.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And I mean, you were commenting on it just now, but one thing that I do appreciate when it comes to horror films is, don't get me wrong, I'm a big horror person. I love the gore and all of that stuff, but it still has to have a purpose. It has to have a point to it. It can't just be gratuitous just for gratuitous sake. Like there has to be something behind it. And the fact that in the midst of all of this grandiose supernatural things that are going on, at the base of it, you have this story of grief with this couple. So could you talk about that and trying to use that component, because you touched on it, you teased on it just a bit earlier, of using that to help ground a lot of the supernatural and grandiose things that's surrounding that story.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like as I first, to be completely honest with you, as I first like got enamored by the tag of this movie, I also said like, okay, well, if I'm going to expect people to kind of like lower their defenses, be vulnerable, and get in contact with some dark stuff, that starts with me, right? So like I look inside and I'm like, what would be my worst nightmare? It is to like lose one of my kids. Like I say this out loud to you, and it freaks me out to say it, but I think as a horror director, you have to like go there. If you don't go there, then it becomes cliche, or then it becomes something that doesn't seem
Inauthentic.
fake.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people won't relate to that as well. So I had to like tap into that and be like, okay, what would I do if I lost somebody that I love truly and somebody gave me the opportunity to talk to them? I would sell my house. I would do whatever I can to do that, as probably you would do the same. So that was like, okay, then landing on that on grief, how do we handle grief from different perspectives? How do we handle grief from Nicole's perspective? How do we handle it from Sebastian? How do we handle it from people who work on the farm? How do we handle it from the squatters? And then try to show the complexity of how the same theme can be explored from different points of view.
Definitely, definitely. I guess the other reason why I was going to say I bring it up is, a lot of times when you're having an opportunity to use something like that, it allows you and gives you license for some of the choices that the characters make. And I know you were commenting earlier of how I'm sure audience members were saying, no, don't do that, or why are you going there? But a lot of times when we're talking about that idea of grief and that concept of grief, you're not going to be in your right mind. You're not going to really think logically. So a lot of things that in your normal circumstances you wouldn't necessarily do, you're given permission that, okay, all right, we get it, because they're still grieving, and they're not acting logically. They're being very illogical. So I mean that's one thing that I would definitely say, and that I'm appreciative of. So
Yeah, I mean, if like exactly, if you have nothing to lose and everything to gain, like who cares? You're like, I'm already living in hell. I want to find a way out. So I think we try to make that the driving force behind Nicole's character. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Thank you for saying it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with this film, considering the setting, it's a very a rural setting, and with that, you automatically think of a lot of the physicality that's necessary to be able to live that type of lifestyle. Again, as I mentioned at the top, under regular circumstances, this is a tricky thing to kind of navigate, but probably even more so when you are doing an independent film, when you're doing an indie picture. So, talk to me about the safety precautions and the stunts that were necessary, because I feel a lot of people take for granted just that idea of riding a horse is considered a stunt, no matter if they're if the horse is moving
Trained.
quickly or moving slowly, it is still another entity that you have to make sure is trained and is being safe with your actors. And I'm just curious, how did that come about, of making sure people were up to speed of being safe?
Yeah, I mean, like obviously a director is always like trying to get the shot, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But hopefully like ADs and the producers and even like, the people trust you. So like they want to do everything they can to please you. So it's up to your responsibility to look out for them because nobody says no to the director, right? So like for example, the scene with the bridge, that when we actually found that bridge, we were gonna build the bridge, and we found it was like, man, this bridge is like terrifying. So we had to do like a harness that was behind what Nicole was wearing inside her clothes, and then that gets erased afterwards, right? But on this movie, actually, both lead actors didn't have that much experience riding horses, and they took lessons, and we made sure that they were prepared, and we asked them like, do you want a stunt to do this? And they're like, nope, I want to do it myself. I'm like, are you sure? Yeah, okay. And it was amazing because then you can like shoot these scenes and not cut camera to the back of the person, right?
So
Like, no,
because
that's
that
like
they're doing it.
Diane.
Yeah.
Diane get ready or run gallop, full on gallop, stops, Mirrors a horse, does this, turns his around, the sun hits the flare, comes out. I'm like, oh my God, he's such a pro. This like, wow. It makes it look easy.
For sure, for sure. And in that same respect, supernatural film, but a lot of what's going on, you're able to accomplish practically. So share with me about that, and making sure that you were able to still sell what was happening supernaturally by what you were doing right there in real time with your acting.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, this is a real religion. It's the Maria Leonzat religion, and I wanted to be respectful to that religion because a lot of people, I mean, like millions of people follow this religion. And I guarantee you, wherever you're living in the US, if you go to a botanica and you walk in and you see a statue, you will find a statue of Maria Leonzat. It's everywhere, but nobody knows about it yet. But so we wanted to be very authentic. So I went to real ceremonies and I had people who are part of this religion advise us of what needs to be on the altar, what the white lines, I thought that white line was going to be like powder. No, it's rice. I thought, all these different things had to be exactly like 12 glasses of water at this thing. Like for them, it's everything. So by being committed to be truthful to what it is in real life, I think once we had rehearsed and we had done like a rehearsal with a full-on ceremony and the actors went to real life ceremonies and for this religion, by the time we went to do these ceremonies, they knew exactly what it was. So then we just kind of like let the ceremony happen as it would and just almost like filmed it like a documentary. And that I think resonates with the audience. Everybody who sees it is like, man, I didn't know about this place. And the people who know about it, they're like, you did it right. We had the exact right drums. We had the exact way to play them. Even when we recorded the music, a certain drum that's from Yoruba that came from Africa had to be like pan left. Another one had to be pan right. Like we had to get everything exactly right because this wasn't an effect. This is somebody's religion, and we want to be extremely respectful to that.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. And I was at shared with you, I talked with you a little earlier at the top of the theme of grief. But one thing that some other themes that came up for me that were very interesting is not just what you have with legacy, of what, without giving anything away of what's transpiring with your characters, and how there is an importance of legacy there, and passing the torch, so to speak, and a character's reluctance, excuse me, to step into that role, but also the idea of having a classism that's also happening there, with the folks that are your quote unquote squatters and those that are not, and how there is this entity that kind of is acting in the middle of everything, and is acting almost as
A puppet master.
a
Yeah.
conduit, yeah, a puppet master between the two. Could you share kind of playing with that? Because as I mentioned at the top, you know, you had a hand in also, you know, shaping the story as well.
Yeah, it's I mean, we're a little bit more hitting it heavier in earlier versions, and then we would just kind of figured that less is more in that sense. So we want to just kind of show the reality of what each person lives. And we thought, like, again, going into back to grief, showing how those quote unquote squatters, the bad guys, handle grief as their quote, as it composed to, like, as opposed to the landowners who have it. And then kind of show that there's something that unites them, that we all have grief, but certain people may not be aware of the other reality. So, like, what I hope is Nicole brings this outside perspective of, like, don't judge a book by its cover, but
Absolutely.
also be sincere about your intentions, because if you're not sincere about those intentions, no matter what they are, either calling a spirit or kicking people out of a land that you're not using, or invading a land that is not yours, whatever your intentions are, if they're not sincere, it will come back and haunt you.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say, on the other end of that, I really, in talking about the legacy part, got a kick out of the interaction with the our matriarch and the husband or her son, and that component of kind of placing him in that role of his father, and the importance of that, and that reluctance of trying to, of accepting that and stepping into that, versus kind of abandoning that now that he's kind of removed himself from his upbringing, or from his world that he has, you know, initially was the only, you know, world in which he knew. So um
It's tough because you have a lot
yeah.
of things pulling him, right? You're like, ideally, that was a character kind of like myself, in the sense of, like, left Venezuela to study, and then, like, myself at that time, I didn't go back for a long time because there was just no opportunity for what I was doing. That was, before the country went to an economic collapse, but, like,
Yeah.
that character goes to study, is supposed to come back, but then falls in love. And then I'm sure in the backstory, when he tries to come back, things are getting worse. There's no gasoline, there's no medicine, there's no electricity. So it's like it just turns into this thing that you keep waiting for things to get better, and they actually don't. And then at one point you have to make the decision, okay, do I start my own life, or do I end up doing that? So it's hard. It's hard for a character to kind of, like, navigate all those different things and then deal with that regret of, like, man, I left my parents alone when they needed me the most, but also I need to start my own life. And then when do you, like, let go of the past that is holding you back, and when do you start without baggage? It's I hope that people watch this movie and bring their own experience to that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, with that, you know, Diego, I want to, you know, thank you so much for sharing some time with me to talk about the Whistler. And I understand that you do have another project that's on the way. I guess you're kind of doing a palate cleanse. So, are you able to share what what that is a bit? Oh,
I mean, yeah, it's funny. I like the next thing I'm doing is a Christmas movie, which is like the opposite. I need a break. I need to
right.
laugh. I feel like the world we live in is pretty dark, so I think it could use a little humor and a little good times, just to, like, balance one and one. So now I'm doing that.
Definitely, definitely, and with that, you know, I always try to give I guess the floor. But actually, before I do that, one thing that I also wanted to see, because we try to make it a point here on this show to assist those that are in that same role of aspiring to do these said roles that our guests are on. So, considering the platform and the resources that are available to any given aspiring artist, what is the path that you would, you know, I'm curious, what was the path that you would advice to someone who's aspiring to direct a film, write a film, would you say the typical path of schooling and all that, or would you say it is an opportunity to kind of set your own path?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would just say be true to yourself. So, like, if in my case personally, I felt that when I went to school, I wanted to learn more. So I went through the camera department route because I figured, like, coming from the poor man syndrome, I want to be able to do it myself, and
Yeah,
therefore I wanted to learn everything I could with the camera. But
yeah,
for other people, it's just like when people ask me, "What's the best way to start directing?" Start directing, start making
yeah,
shorts, because like there are things that you can learn as a crew member that you don't learn as a director. And then what I've, in a weird way, now I'm in my 50s, I have to like remember who I was when I was 18 or when I was like a teenager making films with my friends, and remember what mattered the most to me, because along the way a lot of people are going to tell you what to do,
and you can
and
get jaded
then
a little
and it's
bit.
just like, they tell you what to do, but they're coming to kind of protect their own job in a way, like they may have the best intention, but they're coming out of a place out of fear most of the time, meaning that they don't want to be fired. And then if you end up paying attention to them, you betray yourself and then you beat yourself up for it. So I would just say, like, after being somebody who beats myself up many times, I've learned to like do what you want to do, because in the end, if it fails, you can learn from that experience. If it works, you can then own it and know that you're on the right path. Don't do things for other people because they tell you to do it, because you can never please everybody.
For sure. So it sounds like being able to keep that curiosity that you had, perhaps earlier in your career, and kind of sticking true and authentic to that. So no, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and just like don't let people, I'm not gonna say don't let people bring you down, but I'm gonna say like follow your gut. Because like even for like the release of this movie, we were lucky to get distribution, but there were some things that honestly I don't agree with how it was done. And when I went out and did stuff on my own, people showed up and people are like, like we're gonna distribute the movie in every single Latin American country in September. And that was something that the producers and I did on our own, not knowing if we didn't go the traditional mark of having like a sales agent and then a typical distribution thing. And we just like made it happen. And all of a sudden, it's been the best thing that has worked for the movie, as opposed to going the traditional route in a system that I feel like doesn't really hold up anymore. So, like, don't be scared to kind of rattle the cradle or the boat, rock the boat. And if you believe in it, do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well said. So with that, Diego, can you tell folks where they can find you before I let you go?
Yeah, so you can find me at Chavina, which is my Instagram, and the movie is at the Whistler Movie. And I just want to ask all you guys, if you can buy the movie on Amazon or Fandango at home or Google Play or Apple TV, whatever you do, it makes a big difference, because there's a lot of talented people who worked on that movie. There's a lot of people who want to keep on working on movies, and we're at a time where like I love tools, and I know AI is great, but also we need to also support fellow humans. So like the best way
Yes,
that it happens is by buying that content, subscribing to awesome channels like yours, and supporting for each other, because this is what all we have. And the more we do that, the more we get to do all these cool stuff that people relate to.
absolutely, absolutely. So with that, again, I want to thank Diego Velasco for talking about the Whistler. And as always, I'm your host, Brandon Choi, co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. You can find me at Brandon Choi ENT on X, and then Brandon Choi underscore ENT on Instagram. With that, thank you guys so much for watching. Be safe
Thank
out
you.
there, and
Thank you, Brandon. I like appreciate
absolutely
this space, man. Great job. It was fun.
see you guys soon.